You watch others effortlessly build networks that open doors to opportunities while your hard work goes unrecognized and unrewarded. Every day you deliver excellent results, yet somehow you remain invisible when promotions, partnerships, and lucrative deals are being discussed. While those with stronger relationships seem to attract wealth and success naturally. I am Dale Carnegie, and I spent decades discovering why some people magnetize both friendship and fortune while others struggle alone despite their talents. What I learned about winning friends as a pathway to influencing wealth will transform how you approach every business relationship and financial opportunity. The same principles that helped me build a global empire from teaching human relations can help you turn genuine connections into lasting prosperity. Whether you're building a career, growing a business, or seeking financial freedom, relationships are the currency that makes everything else possible. But first, like this video, subscribe for more life-changing insights, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready to discover the wealth that flows through authentic human connection. I want you to understand something about my beginnings that most people never knew. I wasn't born into wealth or privilege. I grew up on a small farm in Missouri, where my family struggled to make ends meet. My father worked the land with calloused hands, and my mother mended our clothes by candlelight because we couldn't afford to waste kerosene. Every penny mattered, and poverty was a constant companion that taught me the harsh reality that hard work alone doesn't guarantee success. When I first entered the business world, I made the same mistake that millions of people make every day. I believed that if I just worked harder, stayed later, and produced better results than everyone else, success would inevitably follow. I poured my heart into every task, sacrificed my personal time, and dedicated myself completely to my work. Yet month after month, I watched others advance while I remained stuck in the same position, earning barely enough to survive. The turning point came during my early days as a traveling salesman. I was struggling to make sales, living in cheap boarding houses, and questioning whether I had what it took to succeed. One evening, exhausted and discouraged after another day of rejection, I struck up a conversation with an elderly gentleman. In the hotel lobby, instead of talking about myself and my struggles, I found myself genuinely curious about his life and experiences. For 2 hours, I listened as he shared stories about his family, his dreams, and the challenges he faced in his own business. I asked questions, showed genuine interest, and before I knew it, he was asking about my work. By the end of our conversation, he had not only purchased my entire sample case, but had also introduced me to 3 other potential customers in town. That night, I made more sales than I had in the previous 2 weeks combined. But here's what I realized in that hotel lobby that changed everything. The elderly gentleman didn't buy from me because my products were superior or because I had given the most polished presentation. He bought from me because I had made him feel heard, valued, and important. I had connected with him as a human being first, and business naturally followed. That simple revelation became the foundation of everything I would later teach and write about. I discovered that people don't just buy products or services, buy from people they like, trust, and feel connected to. Every successful transaction, every promotion, every opportunity that came my way afterward could be traced back to a genuine human relationship. From that moment forward, I began to approach every interaction with a different mindset. Instead of seeing people as potential customers or stepping stones to my success, I started seeing them as individuals with their own dreams, concerns, and desires. I became genuinely interested in their lives, their challenges, and their aspirations. And something remarkable happened. The more I focused on understanding and helping others, the more opportunities flowed back to me. This wasn't manipulation or a calculated strategy. was a fundamental shift in how I viewed human relationships. I learned that when you genuinely care about someone else's success and happiness, they naturally want to help you achieve yours. It's not magic, it's human nature. People are drawn to those who make them feel valued and understood. The poverty of my childhood had taught me the value of hard work. But my experience in that hotel lobby taught me something even more valuable: the currency of human connection. Every relationship became an investment, not in what I could get from someone, but in how I could contribute to their life. And paradoxically, the more I gave without expecting immediate returns, the more abundant my own life became. Let me share with you a truth that most financial advisors and business schools completely miss. The most profitable investment you can make has nothing to do with stocks, bonds, or real estate. It's the investment you make in understanding and connecting with other human beings. I learned this lesson not from textbooks or theories, but from watching the most successful people I encountered throughout my career. When I first started studying successful individuals, I expected to find sophisticated financial strategies, cutting-edge business techniques, or perhaps some secret knowledge about markets and investments. Instead, I discovered something far simpler and infinitely more powerful. Every wealthy person I met had one thing in common: they had mastered the art of building genuine relationships that naturally led to profitable opportunities. Consider this fundamental truth about business: every transaction, every deal, every opportunity ultimately comes down to one person deciding to trust another person. Behind every contract is a handshake. Behind every partnership is a conversation. Behind every sale is a moment when someone decided they believed in you enough to give you their money. The entire global economy runs on human relationships and the trust that flows between people. Remember meeting a wealthy businessman who owned a chain of successful stores. When I asked him the secret to his success, he pulled out a worn notebook filled with names, addresses, and personal details about hundreds of people. "This," he said, "is my real inventory. Every name in here represents someone I've helped, someone I've connected with, or someone who trusts me. My wealth didn't come from my products, it came from my relationships." That conversation opened my eyes to what I now call the hidden economics of human connection. While most people focus on the visible aspects of business products, services, marketing, competition, the real wealth is created in the invisible realm of relationships, trust, and human psychology. People don't just buy what you're selling, they buy you. They buy your credibility, your likability, and their confidence in your ability to deliver on your promises. Think about compound interest, one of the most powerful forces in traditional investing. The same principle applies to relationships, but with even greater potential returns. Every positive interaction you have with someone builds upon previous interactions, creating a compound effect of trust and goodwill. A favor you do for someone today might lead to an introduction next month, which could result in a business opportunity next year, which might transform your entire career 5 years from now. The beauty of relationship investing is that unlike financial markets, which can crash and lose value overnight, genuine human connections tend to appreciate over time. The person who remembers your kindness from 10 years ago might become the key to your biggest breakthrough. The colleague you helped during their difficult period might one day be in a position to offer you the opportunity of a lifetime. But here's where most people go wrong. They try to build relationships with an immediate transaction in mind. They network with an agenda, hoping for quick returns on their social investments. This approach fails because people can sense insincerity from a mile away. Authentic relationships, the kind that lead to lasting wealth, are built on genuine care and long-term thinking. I've seen ordinary people become extraordinarily wealthy simply by becoming the kind of person others want to help succeed. They understand that in our interconnected world, your network truly is your net worth. But more than that, they understand that your network is only as strong as the trust and goodwill you've built within it. This is why focusing solely on technical skills or product knowledge, while important, will only take you so far. The people who rise to the top of any field are those who combine competence with the ability to form meaningful connections with others. They understand that business is fundamentally a human enterprise, and success comes to those who master the art of human relations. There's a counterintuitive secret to building wealth through relationships that took me years to fully understand. The less you focus on your own success, and the more you focus on helping others achieve theirs, the more successful you become. This principle goes against every instinct we have about competition and self-preservation. Yet, I've seen it work miracles in the lives of countless individuals. Early in my career, I was like most ambitious people, focused primarily on my own advancement, my own goals, my own achievements. I networked with the question, what can this person do for me? Always lurking in the back of my mind. This approach yielded modest results at best, and often left me feeling frustrated when people didn't seem as interested in helping me as I thought they should be. The transformation came when I met a successful businessman named William, who seemed to have an almost magical ability to attract opportunities and partnerships. I watched him at industry events, and what struck me wasn't his sales pitch or his self-promotion, it was his genuine curiosity about everyone he met. He asked thoughtful questions about their businesses, their challenges, and their aspirations. More importantly, he listened to their answers and followed up with helpful suggestions or connections. When I asked William about his approach, he told me something that changed my perspective forever. Dale, I've discovered that the best way to get what you want is to help enough other people get what they want. When you become genuinely interested in other people's success, they become genuinely interested in yours. This wasn't just philosophy, it was practical psychology. When you demonstrate real interest in someone's goals and challenges, several powerful things happen. First, you make them feel valued and important, which is one of the deepest human needs. Second, you gather valuable information about their world, their industry, and their network. Third, you position yourself as someone who adds value rather than someone who just takes. I began to experiment with this approach in my own interactions. Instead of launching into presentations about my services or accomplishments, I started every conversation with genuine questions about the other person's business or interests. I discovered that people love to talk about their work, their challenges, and their dreams if someone is truly listening. The key word here is genuine. People have an uncanny ability to detect when interest is authentic versus when it's merely a technique to manipulate them. Genuine interest means you're actually curious about their world, their perspective, and their experience. It means you ask follow-up questions because you want to understand, not because you're looking for an opening to talk about yourself. I started keeping track of the people I met, noting not just their names and contact information, but their goals, their challenges, and the things that were important to them. When I came across an article, an opportunity, or a contact that might help them, I would reach out and share it with no expectation of immediate return. This simple practice transformed my professional relationships. What happened next surprised even me. People began to think of me when opportunities arose. They would call me first when they heard about job openings, business partnerships, or investment opportunities. I became known as someone who was genuinely helpful, and in a world where most people are focused solely on their own interests, this reputation made me incredibly valuable. But here's the crucial distinction. This isn't about being a people pleaser or saying yes to everything. It's about being strategically helpful, understanding what people truly need, and finding ways to contribute that align with your own skills and interests. When you help someone achieve something they care deeply about, they remember, and more Often than not, they look for ways to return the favor. I learned to listen for opportunity signals in every conversation. When someone mentioned a challenge they were facing, I would think about who in my network might be able to help. When they talked about a goal they were pursuing, I would consider what resources or connections I could provide. This wasn't about solving all their problems, it was about being the kind of person who adds value to every relationship. The compound effect of this approach is remarkable. As you help more people achieve their goals, your reputation as a valuable connector grows. People seek you out not just for your direct services, but because they know you're connected to a network of other successful people. You become a hub of opportunity and information over time. I've realized that this approach had made me wealthy, not just financially, but in terms of the quality of my relationships and the richness of my professional life. The people in my network weren't just contacts, they were friends and allies who genuinely wanted to see me succeed because they knew I wanted to see them succeed. I want to share with you one of the most profitable skills I ever developed, yet it's something that most people completely overlook in their pursuit of wealth. It's the ability to make any person feel genuinely important and valued. This isn't about flattery or manipulation. It's about recognizing and acknowledging the inherent worth in every human being you encounter. Let me tell you about a moment that crystallized this principle for me. I was attending a business conference where I had the opportunity to meet some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. Like everyone else, I was eager to make connections with the prominent speakers and well-known business leaders. But during a break, I noticed the janitor quietly cleaning the conference room. Invisible to the crowd of important people around him, something compelled me to approach him and strike up a conversation. I learned that his name was Robert, and he had been working at the hotel for 15 years. He had put 2 children through college on his modest salary and was incredibly proud of their achievements. We talked for only a few minutes, but I made sure to remember his name and acknowledge the important work he was doing to make the conference possible. 6 months later, I was trying to book a crucial business meeting at that same hotel, but I was told they were completely booked. When I arrived to plead my case in person, Robert saw me in the lobby and greeted me by name. After hearing about my situation, he quietly mentioned that he knew about a last-minute cancellation that hadn't been officially processed yet. That conversation led to one of the most profitable business relationships of my career. This experience taught me a fundamental truth. Everyone you meet knows something you don't know, has connections you don't have, or possesses influence in areas where you have none. The person you overlook today might be the key to your breakthrough tomorrow. But more than that, making people feel important isn't just good strategy, it's the right thing to do. I began to study the psychology behind what makes people feel valued and important. I discovered that one of the deepest human needs is the desire for appreciation and recognition. Most people go through their days feeling invisible and unappreciated. When you genuinely acknowledge their worth, their contributions, or their unique qualities, you give them something precious that they rarely receive. The simplest way to make someone feel important is to remember and use their name. I made it a practice to not only learn names quickly, but to use them naturally in conversation. I would also remember personal details from previous conversations, their children's names, their hobbies, their recent achievements or challenges. This wasn't about having a perfect memory. It was about caring enough to pay attention, but making people feel important goes far beyond remembering names and details. It's about recognizing their expertise and seeking their advice. I learned to ask questions like, "What do you think about?" or "I'd value your opinion on ... People love to share their knowledge and experience, and when you position them as an expert in their field, they feel valued and respected. I also discovered the power of public recognition. When someone did something helpful or impressive, I made sure to acknowledge it in front of others. Whether it was thanking a server for excellent service in front of my business associates or recognizing a colleague's contribution in a meeting. These small acts of public appreciation had enormous impact on how people felt about themselves and about me. One of the most powerful techniques I developed was what I called importance by association. Instead of trying to impress people with my own accomplishments, I would ask them about theirs. I would say things like, "I heard about your recent promotion, you must be very proud," or "your presentation at the industry conference was outstanding." By celebrating their achievements, I made them feel important while also demonstrating that I paid attention to what mattered to them. The business returns on this approach were remarkable. People who felt valued and appreciated in my presence naturally wanted to spend more time with me. They thought of me when opportunities arose because I was associated in their minds with positive feelings about themselves. They were more likely to say yes to my requests because I had consistently made them feel good about who they were. But perhaps the most surprising discovery was how this practice changed me. When you focus on making others feel important, you become more observant, more curious, and more appreciative of the unique qualities in every person you meet. You start to see the world through a lens of abundance rather than scarcity, recognizing that there's enough success and recognition to go around for everyone. I learned that making people feel important isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's about small, consistent acts of recognition and appreciation. It's about listening when they speak, asking about things that matter to them, and acknowledging their contributions to your shared experiences. These simple practices create a magnetic quality that draws people toward you and makes them want to be part of your success story. I once met a businessman who had built a fortune in real estate, yet he rarely spoke in meetings and never seemed to dominate conversations. When I asked him about his success, he smiled and said, "Dale, I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I use them in that proportion. My wealth came from listening twice as much as I talked." That simple statement revolutionized how I approached every business interaction for the rest of my career. Most people think the key to business success is being a great talker, someone who can present ideas eloquently, negotiate persuasively, or sell convincingly. But I discovered something far more powerful. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, the person who truly listens holds all the advantages. Listening isn't just polite behavior. It's a competitive advantage that can transform your financial future. When you listen actively and genuinely, you gain access to information that others miss completely. People reveal their deepest concerns, their hidden motivations, their unmet needs, and their future plans, but only to those who are truly paying attention. While your competitors are busy preparing their next sales pitch, you're gathering intelligence that will give you an unbeatable edge. I learned to listen for what people weren't saying as much as for what they were saying. When a potential client mentioned being satisfied with their current vendor, I heard uncertainty. When someone talked about exploring options, I heard dissatisfaction with the status quo. When they said budget is tight, I heard a need for better value. Not necessarily lower prices, but effective listening goes far beyond just staying quiet while others talk. It requires genuine curiosity and the discipline to resist the urge to interrupt with your own thoughts and solutions. I developed what I called strategic silence, moments when I would pause before responding, allowing the other person to fill the silence with additional information that often proved to be the most valuable part of our conversation. I also learned the power of asking follow-up questions that demonstrated I was truly engaged. Instead of generic responses like "that's interesting," I would say things like "what led you to that conclusion?" or "how did that impact your business?" These questions showed that I was not only listening but thinking about what they were. Sharing that one of my most profitable listening experiences came during a casual conversation at a trade association dinner. A fellow member mentioned in passing that his company was struggling with employee retention in their sales department. While others at the table quickly moved on to different topics, I asked thoughtful questions about their challenges. Through careful listening, I learned that their problem wasn't compensation or working conditions, was a lack of proper sales training. That 15-minute conversation led to a consulting contract that lasted 3 years and generated more income than any single project I had ever undertaken. But it almost didn't happen. If I had been focused on talking about my own services or waiting for my turn to speak, I would have missed the opportunity entirely. I discovered that when you listen carefully to people's challenges and concerns, you often hear multiple business opportunities. The client who complains about their current vendor is telling you how to win their business. The colleague who mentions a staffing challenge might need your services or know someone who does. The prospect who explains their decision-making process is giving you a roadmap to closing the deal. Perhaps most importantly, listening builds trust faster than any other communication skill. When people feel truly heard and understood, they naturally begin to see you as someone they can confide in and rely on. This trust becomes the foundation for long-term business relationships that generate opportunities year after year. The discipline of listening also taught me patience in business dealings. Instead of rushing to close deals or push for immediate decisions, I learned to let conversations unfold naturally, gathering information and building rapport until the timing was perfect for making my proposal. This approach led to higher closing rates and stronger client relationships. Let me tell you about one of the most powerful forces in human psychology that I learned to harness for building wealth through relationships. It's called reciprocity, and once you understand how it works, you'll see opportunities to create lasting prosperity everywhere you look. Reciprocity is the psychological principle that when someone does something kind or helpful for us, we feel an almost overwhelming urge to return the favor. This isn't just polite behavior. It's a fundamental aspect of human nature that has governed social interactions for thousands of years. The genius lies in understanding how to apply this principle strategically in business relationships. Early in my career, I made the mistake that most people make. I tried to get before I gave. I would approach potential clients or business partners with my hand out, asking for their business, their referrals, or their support. This approach created resistance because I was asking people to invest in me before I had invested in them. The breakthrough came when I reversed this approach entirely. Instead of asking what people could do for me, I started every relationship by looking for ways I could help them. This wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about small, thoughtful acts of service that demonstrated my value and goodwill. I began keeping what I privately called my favor bank, a mental ledger of opportunities to help others. In my network, when I read an article that might interest a business contact, I would clip it and send it along with a personal note. When I heard about a job opening that might suit someone I knew, I would make the introduction. When I discovered a solution to a problem someone had mentioned, I would share it without being asked. The key to making reciprocity work in business is understanding the psychology of giving and receiving. When you do someone a favor, you're not just helping them, you're creating what psychologists call a reciprocal obligation. The recipient feels indebted to you, and this feeling motivates them to look for ways to return the favor when the opportunity arises. But here's the crucial point. The favor must be given freely, without strings attached, and without immediate expectation of return. If people sense that you're keeping score or that your generosity comes with conditions, the psychological power of reciprocity is destroyed. The most effective approach is to give with genuine intention to help, trusting that the principle of reciprocity will work in your favor over time. I discovered that the most powerful favors are often the smallest ones. Remembering someone's birthday, making a valuable introduction, sharing useful information, or simply offering encouragement during a difficult time can create more goodwill than expensive gifts or elaborate gestures. People remember how you made them feel, and small acts of thoughtfulness often have a much greater impact than their size would suggest. The timing of favors is also crucial. The most valuable help you can offer is often preventive, identifying and addressing someone's need before they even realize they have it. When you consistently demonstrate this kind of awareness and proactive helpfulness, you become known as someone who adds value to every relationship. I learned to think of reciprocity as a long-term investment strategy rather than a short-term tactic. Some of the favors I did early in my career didn't yield returns for years, but when they did, the results were often extraordinary. A simple introduction I made between two business associates led to a partnership that eventually resulted in multiple opportunities for me. A piece of advice I gave to a struggling entrepreneur helped him turn his business around, and he later became one of my most valuable clients. One of my most memorable experiences with reciprocity involved a young man who was just starting his career in publishing. He approached me for advice, and I spent an hour sharing what I had learned about the industry. I also introduced him to several key contacts who could help him get established. 10 years later, when I was looking to expand my reach into new markets, that same young man, now a successful publisher himself, not only offered me opportunities, but opened doors that would have been impossible to access any other way. The beauty of reciprocity in business relationships is that it creates a positive cycle. As you help more people achieve their goals, your reputation as a valuable connector grows. People begin to seek you out, not just for your direct services, but because they know you're connected to a network of other successful people who might be able to help them. But reciprocity isn't just about doing favors for others. It's also about graciously accepting help when it's offered to you. I learned that when someone does something kind for you, acknowledging it appropriately and expressing genuine gratitude creates a bond that often leads to deeper business relationships. People want to feel that their efforts to help you were noticed and appreciated. One of the most expensive mistakes I see people make in business is winning arguments at the cost of losing relationships. I learned this lesson the hard way early in my career when I proved a potential client wrong about an important industry trend. I was absolutely correct on the facts, but my need to be right cost me a significant contract and damaged what could have been a profitable long-term relationship. That painful experience taught me something invaluable in business. Being right is far less important than being effective. You can win every argument and lose every opportunity, or you can learn to handle disagreements in ways that actually strengthen your relationships and create new possibilities for mutual success. The first principle I discovered is that most disagreements in business aren't really about facts. They're about feelings, ego, and the human need to feel respected and heard. When someone takes a position that conflicts with yours, attacking their position directly will trigger their defensive instincts and make them more committed to their original stance, even if evidence suggests they might be wrong. Instead, I learned to use what I call the diplomatic bridge approach. When faced with disagreement, I would start by finding something in their position that I could genuinely agree with or appreciate. I might say something like, "You raise an excellent point about market timing," or "I can see why you'd be concerned about those factors." This acknowledgement doesn't mean you're conceding the entire argument. It means you're demonstrating respect for their perspective and intelligence. After establishing this common ground, I would introduce my different viewpoint, not as a contradiction, but as an additional consideration. Instead of saying "you're wrong about that," I would say, "Here's another way to look at it," or "I've had a slightly different experience with this issue." This approach allows both parties to maintain dignity while exploring alternative perspectives. I discovered that the most powerful phrase in business negotiations is "help me understand your thinking on this." This question demonstrates respect for their reasoning process while giving you valuable insight into their concerns, priorities, and decision-making criteria. Often, what appears to be a disagreement about facts is actually a disagreement about values or priorities, and understanding these deeper motivations is the key to finding mutually acceptable solutions. One of my most successful applications of this principle occurred during a contract negotiation where the client insisted on terms that seemed unreasonable to me. Instead of arguing against their position, I asked them to help me understand what they were trying to accomplish with those terms. It turned out their primary concern wasn't the specific contract language, it was ensuring that their project would receive priority attention during busy periods. Once I understood their real concern, I was able to propose alternative language that addressed their need while working better for my business. Another crucial skill I developed was learning to separate the person from the position. When someone took a stance I disagreed with, I would remind myself that they weren't my enemy, they were someone with different information, different experiences, or different priorities. This mental shift allowed me to maintain respect and warmth for them as individuals, even while working through our professional disagreements. I also learned the power of strategic concessions. Sometimes the wisest course is to concede points that aren't crucial to your core interests in order to maintain goodwill and preserve the relationship. These small concessions often create reciprocal goodwill that leads to bigger wins down the road. The key is knowing which battles are worth fighting and which ones are better avoided. Time became another important tool in handling disagreements. I discovered that immediate responses to challenging positions often led to defensive reactions and escalated conflict. Instead, I would often say something like, "That's an interesting perspective. Let me think about what you've said and get back to you." This pause allowed emotions to cool down and gave me time to craft a response that addressed their concerns while advancing my interests. Perhaps most importantly, I learned to view disagreements as opportunities rather than obstacles. When someone disagreed with my approach, it often revealed information about market conditions, customer preferences, or operational challenges that I hadn't considered. Some of my most profitable business pivots came from paying attention to intelligent disagreement from trusted advisors and business partners. The long-term value of handling disagreements diplomatically cannot be overstated. Business relationships are built over years and decades, and how you handle conflicts and disagreements becomes part of your professional reputation. People remember not just whether you were right or wrong, but how you made them feel during difficult conversations. I want to share with you one of the most underutilized tools in business: the power of genuine, specific compliments. Most people either avoid giving compliments entirely, fearing they'll seem insincere, or they offer generic praise that falls flat. But when you master the art of authentic appreciation, you create business relationships that generate opportunities for decades. The transformation in my understanding of compliments came during a meeting with a successful manufacturer who had built his company from nothing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. As we toured his facility, I was genuinely impressed by the efficiency of his operations and the obvious pride his employees took in their work. Instead of keeping these observations to myself, I shared them specifically. "I can see why your company has grown so rapidly. The way you've organized this production line shows real understanding of both efficiency and worker satisfaction." His response was immediate and powerful. His face lit up, and he spent the next hour giving me insights into his business philosophy and industry trends that proved invaluable. More importantly, he began introducing me to other successful business owners in his network. That single, genuine compliment opened doors that led to multiple business opportunities over the following years. The key to effective business compliments is specificity and sincerity. Generic praise, like "great job" or nice work is quickly forgotten because it could apply to anyone or anything. But when you notice and acknowledge specific achievements, innovations, or qualities, you demonstrate that you're truly paying attention and that your appreciation is based on real observation. I learned to look for what I called hidden achievements, accomplishments, that others might overlook but that revealed important qualities about the person or their business. For example, I might compliment someone on how well they had trained their staff, the thoughtful way they had designed their office space, or their ability to explain complex concepts clearly. These observations showed that I was looking beyond surface impressions to understand what made them successful. The timing of compliments is crucial. The most powerful appreciation comes immediately after you observe something worthy of praise. When you wait too long, the moment loses its impact and the compliment can seem calculated rather than spontaneous. I made it a practice to express appreciation in the moment, whether it was for an insightful comment in a meeting or an innovative solution to a business challenge. I also discovered the multiplier effect of public recognition. When I complimented someone in front of their colleagues, employees, or other business associates, the impact was exponentially greater. Public praise not only made the recipient feel valued, but also enhanced their reputation in front of people who mattered to them. This approach created gratitude that lasted far longer than private compliments. But perhaps the most important lesson I learned about compliments was the difference between appreciation and flattery. Flattery is praise designed to manipulate someone into giving you what you want. Appreciation is recognition of genuine value that you've observed. People can sense this difference instinctively, and while flattery might work temporarily, authentic appreciation builds lasting relationships. One of my most memorable experiences with the power of compliments involved a potential client who was known for being difficult to work with. During our first meeting, instead of focusing on winning his business, I paid attention to what he had accomplished in his industry. I noticed that despite his reputation for being demanding, his company had unusually low employee turnover and consistently high customer satisfaction ratings. When I mentioned these observations and asked him about his management philosophy, something shifted in our conversation. He began sharing insights into his approach to business that revealed a thoughtful, principled leader who simply had high standards. By focusing on his genuine strengths rather than trying to work around his perceived weaknesses, I was able to build a relationship that led to one of my most profitable and personally satisfying client partnerships. I learned to keep what I privately called an appreciation journal, mental notes about the unique qualities and achievements I observed in the people I met. This practice trained my mind to look for the positive aspects of every business relationship, which not only made my compliments more authentic, but also improved my overall attitude toward the people I worked with. The business returns on sincere appreciation are remarkable. People who feel genuinely valued by you become advocates for your success. They think of you first when opportunities arise, recommend you to others in their network, and go out of their way to help you achieve your goals. This happens naturally because you've made them feel good about themselves and their accomplishments. The most profitable skill I ever developed wasn't technical expertise or industry knowledge. It was the ability to win people to my way of thinking without making them feel defeated or manipulated. This skill transformed every aspect of my business, relationships, and opened doors to opportunities I never could have imagined. Most people approach persuasion like a battle, trying to overwhelm others with logic, pressure them with urgency, or convince them through sheer force of personality. But I discovered something far more effective. The best way to change someone's mind is to make them feel like they're changing it themselves. The breakthrough came when I was trying to convince a potential client to try a new approach to training his sales team. Instead of presenting my proposal as the obvious solution, I started by asking questions about his current challenges and his vision for improvement. Through careful questioning, I guided him to identify the same problems I had noticed and to articulate the same solutions. I had planned to propose. By the end of our conversation, he was enthusiastically endorsing ideas that he believed he had developed himself. When people feel ownership of an idea, they become its strongest advocates. They defend it more vigorously than they would defend someone else's proposal, and they work harder to make it successful because its success reflects on their judgment. Learned to plant seeds of ideas rather than transplant fully grown solutions. Instead of saying you should implement this training program, I would ask, what do you think would happen if your sales team had more confidence in handling objections? This question led him to envision the benefits himself, making him much more receptive to my specific recommendations. The psychology behind this approach is profound. When you tell someone what to think or do, you trigger their natural resistance to being controlled or told what's best for them. But when you ask thoughtful questions that lead them to draw their own conclusions, you're working with their psychology rather than against it. I developed what I called the discovery method of persuasion. Instead of presenting conclusions, I would present facts and observations in a sequence that led naturally to the conclusion I wanted them to reach. I might say something like, I've noticed that companies in your industry that have invested in advanced training tend to have higher employee retention rates. What's been your experience with turnover costs? This approach required patience and skill in asking the right questions in the right order, but the results were remarkable. People convinced themselves, which meant they stayed convinced long. After our conversation ended, they also felt intelligent and insightful for having discovered these solutions, which enhanced their confidence in both the ideas and in me as someone who helped them think clearly. I also learned the power of making people feel that their perspective was valuable and that I was genuinely seeking their input. Instead of presenting my ideas as the only viable option, I would say things like, I have some thoughts on this, but I'd really value your perspective first. Or you know your business better than anyone, what do you think would work best in your situation? This approach served multiple purposes. It made them feel respected and consulted rather than lectured to. It gave me valuable information about their priorities and concerns, and it created a collaborative atmosphere where we were working together to find solutions rather than me trying to sell them something. One of my most successful applications of this principle involved a company that was resistant to investing in employee development programs. Instead of arguing about the benefits of training, I asked them to help me understand their biggest operational challenges. As they described problems with productivity, customer complaints, and employee turnover, I asked follow-up questions that helped them see the connections between these issues and skill gaps in their workforce. By the end of our conversation, they were asking me to design a comprehensive training program to address the problems they had identified. The same proposal that would have been rejected if I had presented it directly was enthusiastically accepted when they felt they had participated in developing it. I discovered that the most persuasive evidence isn't data or logical argument, it's the other person's own experiences and observations. When I could help someone connect their current challenges to solutions I was proposing, using examples from their own business, the persuasion was almost automatic. The long-term benefits of this approach extend far beyond individual transactions. When people feel that you respect their intelligence and value their input, they begin to see you as a trusted advisor rather than a salesperson. This transformation in the relationship dynamic leads to ongoing opportunities and referrals that would be impossible to achieve through more aggressive persuasion tactics. After years of observing successful people and analyzing my own experiences, I developed what I came to call my formula for networking success. This isn't about collecting business cards or attending events. It's a systematic approach to building a network that consistently generates opportunities and wealth. The formula has 5 components, and I want to share each one with you because together they create a networking system that works regardless of your industry, personality type, or current level of success. First is what I call strategic positioning. Most people network randomly, meeting whoever happens to be available, at events or through chance encounters. But successful networking requires intent. I learned to identify the types of people who could most impact my goals, and then position myself where those people naturally gather. This doesn't mean being calculating or manipulative. It means being strategic about where you invest your time and energy. If you want to build a consulting business, you position yourself where business leaders gather. If you want to advance in your industry, you connect with people who are already where you want to be. Second is value-first engagement. Every interaction should begin with how you can help the other person, not how they can help you. I developed the habit of asking myself, what can I offer this person? Before every networking conversation. Sometimes it was information, sometimes an introduction, sometimes just genuine interest in their challenges and goals. This approach completely changed how people responded to me at networking events. Instead of the typical exchange of business cards and sales pitches, I was having meaningful conversations about people's real needs and interests. These conversations led to follow-up meetings, referrals, and opportunities that never would have emerged from surface-level networking. Third is systematic follow-through. The fortune is in the follow-up, but most people do it poorly or not at all. I created a system for staying in touch with my network that felt natural rather than forced. Within 24 hours of meeting someone new, I would send a personalized note, referencing our conversation and including something of value: an article, a resource, or an introduction they had mentioned needing. I also developed what I called my networking calendar, regular touchpoints with key people in my network that weren't tied to needing something from them. A congratulations note on a promotion, a relevant news article, or simply checking in during challenging times in their industry. These touches kept me top of mind when opportunities arose. Fourth is connection facilitation. One of the fastest ways to become valuable in any network is to become known as someone who connects others. I made it a practice to introduce people in my network who could benefit from knowing each other. When you facilitate valuable connections for others, you become the hub of your network rather than just another spoke. I kept mental notes about what each person in my network was looking for: new customers, strategic partners, industry insights, or talented employees. When I met someone who could fulfill those needs, I made the introduction. This practice generated enormous goodwill and positioned me as someone who added value to every relationship. Fifth is long-term relationship maintenance. Networks aren't built in months, they're built over years and decades. I learned to think of networking as relationship farming rather than relationship hunting. Some of the most valuable connections in my career didn't pay dividends for 5 or 10 years, but when they did, the returns were extraordinary. This long-term perspective changed how I approached every relationship. Instead of evaluating people based on what they could do for me immediately, I looked for character, competence, and growth potential. Some of the junior employees I mentored early in my career later became senior executives who opened doors I never could have accessed any other way. The most important thing I learned about networking is that it's not about the quantity of connections, it's about the quality of relationships. A smaller network of people who genuinely know, like, and trust you will generate more opportunities than a large collection of superficial contacts. I also discovered that the best networking often happens outside of formal networking events. Some of my most valuable business relationships began at social gatherings, community events, or even chance encounters in airports or coffee shops. When you approach every interaction with curiosity and helpfulness, networking becomes a natural part of your daily life rather than a separate business activity. One of the most profitable skills I ever developed was learning how to transform my harshest critics into my strongest advocates. This might sound impossible, but I discovered that the people who oppose you often hold the keys to your greatest breakthroughs. You know how to approach them correctly. The lesson came to me through a painful but ultimately transformative experience. Early in my career, I had a public disagreement with a prominent figure in my industry who criticized my methods in front of a large audience. I was angry and embarrassed, and my first instinct was to defend myself and attack his position. Fortunately, a wise mentor advised me to take a different approach. Instead of fighting back, I decided to reach out to this critic privately. I wrote him a letter acknowledging that his criticism had forced me to examine my methods more carefully. I thanked him for caring enough about our industry to speak up when he saw something he believed was wrong. Most importantly, I asked for his advice on how I could improve my approach. His response surprised me completely. He invited me to lunch and spent 2 hours sharing insights that transformed my understanding of our industry. What had started as a conflict became one of the most valuable mentoring relationships of my career. Even more remarkably, he became one of my strongest public advocates, often referring business opportunities to me. This experience taught me that criticism, even harsh criticism, often comes from people who care deeply about the same things you care about. They're not necessarily enemies, they're people with different perspectives on how to achieve shared goals. When you approach them with humility and genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness, you can often transform the dynamic completely. I developed what I called the critic conversion process. When someone criticized my work or opposed my ideas, I would follow a specific sequence of responses. First, I would resist the natural urge to defend or counterattack. Instead, I would listen carefully to understand not just what they were saying, but why they felt compelled to say it. Second, I would find something in their criticism that I could genuinely agree with or appreciate. This wasn't about being was about looking for the kernel of truth or valid concern that usually exists even in harsh criticism. By acknowledging this valid point, I could begin a dialogue rather than perpetuate a conflict. Third, I would ask for their help in addressing the concerns they had raised. This approach transformed me from an adversary they needed to defeat into a colleague seeking their expertise. Most people find it very difficult to remain hostile toward someone who has asked for their help in solving a problem they care about. One of my most successful applications of this approach involved a competitor who had been spreading negative information about my services to potential clients. Instead of trying to counter his claims publicly, I contacted him directly and asked if we could meet to discuss his concerns about industry practices. During our conversation, I learned that his criticism wasn't really about me personally. It was about what he saw as declining standards in our profession. His attacks on my work were actually attempts to protect the reputation of an industry he cared deeply about. Once I understood his motivations, I was able to find common ground and propose ways we could work together to address his concerns. Not only did he stop criticizing my work, but we eventually developed a referral relationship where we sent clients to each other when their needs better matched our respective specialties. What had been a destructive, competitive relationship became a mutually beneficial partnership. I also learned the power of public acknowledgement in transforming adversarial relationships. When someone who had previously criticized me made a valid point or achieved something noteworthy, I would publicly recognize their contribution. This generous response often surprised former critics and opened the door for more positive interactions. The key to this approach is genuine humility and a long-term perspective. You have to be willing to admit when criticism is valid and be genuinely interested in improving rather than just winning arguments. You also have to think beyond immediate conflicts to consider the long-term value of relationships. Some of my most profitable business relationships began as conflicts or disagreements. The intensity of feeling that creates opposition often indicates passion and expertise that can be redirected toward mutual benefit. When you can transform an enemy into an ally, you often gain not just a supporter, but an advocate who understands your challenges deeply because they once opposed you. The difference between people who build wealth through relationships and those who struggle to make meaningful connections isn't talent, luck, or circumstances, it's mindset. After studying hundreds of successful people and examining my own journey, I discovered that wealthy relationship builders think fundamentally differently about human connections than most people do. The first mental shift that changed everything for me was moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset about relationships. Most people approach networking as if there's a limited amount of success, opportunity, and goodwill to go around. They hoard contacts, guard information, and see other people's success as a threat to their own prospects. But I learned that relationships operate on abundance principles. The more you help others succeed, the more successful you become. The more connections you facilitate for others, the more valuable you become to your network. The more opportunities you share, the more opportunities flow back to you. This isn't wishful thinking, it's practical psychology. When I shifted to abundance thinking, I stopped worrying about competitors stealing my contacts and started introducing my best clients to other qualified service providers when it served their interests. Paradoxically, this approach made my client relationships stronger, not weaker. People trust you more when they believe you're looking out for their best interests rather than just your own. The second crucial mindset shift was learning to think of relationships as long-term investments rather than short-term transactions. Most people approach networking with an immediate goal in mind. They want to make a sale, get a referral, or find a new job. This transactional thinking makes people uncomfortable because they sense they're being used rather than valued. I learned to think in decades rather than quarters. When I met someone interesting, I would invest in the relationship without any specific expectation of return. I would look for ways to help them achieve their goals, celebrate their successes, and support them through challenges. This investment mindset allowed me to build relationships with people long before they became successful and influential. Some of my most valuable business relationships took 5 or 10 years to generate significant returns. But when those returns came, they were often larger than anything I could have achieved through short-term thinking. The junior employee I mentored became a senior executive. The struggling entrepreneur I advised built a successful company. The student I helped became an industry leader. The third mindset shift was understanding that your network is not your net worth. Your net worth quality is your net worth. It's not about how many people you know. It's about how well they know you and how much they trust and value you. I learned to focus on depth rather than breadth in my relationship building. I started asking myself different questions about my network. Instead of how many people do I know, I asked how many people would enthusiastically recommend me. Instead of who can help me, I asked who have I helped recently. Instead of what can I get from this relationship, I asked what can I contribute to this person's success. This shift in questioning led to a shift in behavior. I spent more time nurturing existing relationships and less time collecting new contacts. I focused on being genuinely helpful rather than just being visible. I worked on becoming known for specific, valuable qualities, rather than just being known. The fourth mindset transformation was learning to see rejection and setbacks as information rather than failure. Not every relationship will develop into a valuable business connection, and not every networking effort will yield immediate results. I learned to view these experiences as data that helped me refine my approach, rather than evidence that relationship building didn't work. When someone didn't respond to my outreach, I considered whether my approach had been genuinely helpful or if I had been too focused on my own agenda. When a relationship didn't develop as I had hoped, I examined whether I had been investing consistently or just reaching out when I needed something. The final and perhaps most important mindset shift was understanding that relationship wealth isn't about manipulation or calculation. It's about becoming genuinely interested in other people's success and happiness. When you authentically care about the people in your network, relationship building stops feeling like work and becomes a natural expression of who you are. This authentic approach creates a magnetic quality that draws people toward you. They sense that you're genuinely interested in them as individuals, not just as potential business opportunities. This authenticity creates trust faster than any technique or strategy ever could. The compound effect of these mindset shifts was remarkable. As I became known as someone who genuinely cared about others' success, who thought long-term about relationships, and who focused on giving rather than getting, opportunities began flowing to me in ways I had never experienced before. People thought of me first when opportunities arose, because I had consistently demonstrated that I was thinking of them first. Once you've built a strong network of genuine relationships, the next challenge is learning how to leverage those connections ethically and effectively for business opportunities. This is where many people struggle. They either never ask for help, missing valuable opportunities, or they ask poorly, damaging relationships they've worked hard to build. The key insight I discovered is that leveraging your network isn't about using people. It's about creating value for everyone involved. The most successful requests for help are those where you can demonstrate clear benefit, not just for yourself, but for the person you're asking, and often for third parties as well. I learned to think of my network as a marketplace of resources, skills, and opportunities. When someone in my network had a need that another person in my network could fulfill, I became the connector who facilitated value creation for both parties. This approach generated goodwill with everyone involved and established my reputation as someone who made valuable things happen. The first principle of effective network leveraging is timing. You can't build a relationship today and leverage it tomorrow. The most powerful asks come after you've established a foundation of trust and reciprocity. I made it a rule never to ask for significant favors from new relationships. Instead, I would look for ways to help them first, building a reservoir of goodwill that I could draw on later. When the timing was right and I needed to leverage a relationship, I learned to make requests that were specific, reasonable, and mutually beneficial. Instead of saying, "Let me know if you hear of any opportunities," I would say, "I'm looking to connect with marketing directors at technology companies who are struggling with customer retention. Do you know anyone in that space who might benefit from a conversation?" This approach made it easy for people to help me because I had given them a clear picture of what I was looking for and why it would be valuable to the person they might introduce me to. It also positioned my request as an opportunity to help someone in their network rather than just a favor for me. I also discovered the power of making it easy for people to say no. When I made requests of my network, I would always include language like, "I know you're busy, so please don't feel any pressure if this doesn't make sense, or only introduce me if you think it would genuinely benefit both of us." This approach actually increased the likelihood that people would help because it removed any feeling of obligation or pressure. One of my most successful network leveraging strategies was what I called opportunity arbitrage. I would identify situations where someone in my network had a resource, skill, or opportunity that would be valuable to someone else in my network. By facilitating these connections, I created value for both parties while strengthening my relationships with each of them. For example, I once knew a successful entrepreneur who was looking for office space and a commercial real estate agent who had a perfect property that had been difficult to lease. by introducing them and helping facilitate a deal that worked for both parties. I strengthened my relationships with both individuals and established my reputation as someone who could create win-win opportunities. I learned to keep what I privately called an opportunity inventory, mental notes about what each person in my network was looking for and what they had to offer. When I met someone new, I would automatically scan my inventory to see if there were potential connections that could benefit multiple parties. The most important aspect of leveraging your network is maintaining the relationship after the favor has been granted. Too many people make the mistake of disappearing after someone has helped them, which damages the relationship and makes it unlikely that the person will help again in the future. I made it a practice to follow up on every introduction or favor with updates on how things developed. If someone introduced me to a potential client and we didn't end up working together, I would let them know what happened and thank them for the introduction. If we did end up working together, I would share the success and express my gratitude for their role in making it happen. I also looked for ways to reciprocate value back to people who had helped me. This didn't always mean direct reciprocation. If someone introduced me to a client, I didn't necessarily need to introduce them to a client in return, but I would look for other ways to add value to their life or business, whether it was sharing relevant information, making different types of introductions, or simply being a supportive colleague. Perhaps the most sophisticated form of network leveraging is what I called compound introductions, situations where you can create value for multiple people simultaneously. These might involve organizing informal gatherings where several people in your network who could benefit from knowing each other have the opportunity to meet, or facilitating multi-party business opportunities where several people in your network could collaborate profitably. The long-term result of effective network leveraging is that you become known as someone who makes valuable things happen. People seek you out not just for your direct services, but because they know you're connected to a network of other successful people, and that you have a track record of creating beneficial connections. Understanding the psychology behind how people make decisions revolutionized my approach to sales and negotiations. Most people try to influence others through logic, pressure, or manipulation, but I discovered that the most powerful influence comes from understanding and working with natural human psychology rather than against it. The first psychological principle I mastered was the power of emotional connection before logical presentation. People make decisions emotionally and then justify them logically. If you haven't connected with someone emotionally, all the logic in the world won't persuade them. But once you've established that emotional connection, they'll help you find logical reasons to support the decision they already want to make. I learned to begin every sales conversation by focusing entirely on understanding the other person's situation, challenges, and goals. Instead of presenting my solutions, I would ask questions that helped them articulate their problems and envision better outcomes. This approach served multiple purposes. It made them feel heard and understood. It gave me crucial information about their real motivations, and it created an emotional investment in finding solutions. The breakthrough came when I realized that people don't buy products or services, they buy better versions of themselves. Every purchase decision is ultimately about how the buyer believes your solution will improve their life, their business, or their status. When you can help someone see themselves achieving their goals through your offering, the sale becomes almost inevitable. I developed what I called future visioning as a core technique. Instead of focusing on features and benefits, I would help prospects imagine specific scenarios where they were already enjoying the results they wanted. I might say something like, picture yourself 6 months from now when your team is consistently hitting their targets. How do you think that will change your relationship with senior management? This approach made the benefits tangible and personal. Another crucial psychological insight was understanding the different ways people process information and make decisions. Some people are motivated by opportunities for gain, while others are motivated by the need to avoid loss. Some people need extensive data and analysis, while others trust their intuition and make quick decisions based on how they feel about you and your proposal. I learned to read these psychological cues and adapt my approach accordingly. For analytical decision makers, I would provide detailed information and case studies. For intuitive decision makers, I would focus on building trust and painting compelling pictures of success. For gain-motivated people, I would emphasize opportunities and potential rewards. For loss-averse people, I would focus on risks they could avoid and problems they could solve. The power of social proof became one of my most effective influence tools. People are strongly influenced by what others in similar situations have done, especially when those others are people they respect or identify with. I began collecting and sharing specific stories about how other clients had achieved success using my services, always making sure the stories were relevant to the prospect's situation. But the most important aspect of using social proof was authenticity. Generic testimonials or claims about hundreds of satisfied customers had little impact. Specific stories about real people facing similar challenges and achieving measurable results were incredibly powerful. I would say things like, "Last month, I worked with a company very similar to yours that was struggling with exactly the same issue. Here's what we did, and here's what happened." I also discovered the psychological power of involvement in the decision-making process. When people participate in developing solutions, they become emotionally invested in making those solutions work. Instead of presenting complete proposals, I would present frameworks and involve prospects in customizing the approach to their specific situation. This collaborative approach served multiple purposes. It gave me additional insights into their priorities and concerns. It made them feel like partners in the process rather than targets of a sales pitch. And it increased their commitment to moving forward because they had participated in creating the solution. One of the most sophisticated psychological techniques I developed was what I called assumption reversal. Instead of trying to convince skeptical prospects that my approach would work, I would ask them to help me understand why it might not work in their situation. This question often revealed their real concerns and objections, which I could then address directly. More importantly, this approach positioned me as someone who was genuinely interested in finding the right solution rather than just making a sale. When prospects sensed that I was willing to walk away if my service wasn't right for them, their defensive barriers came down and they became more open to exploring possibilities. The psychology of timing also played a crucial role in my influence strategies. I learned to recognize when prospects were ready to make decisions and when they needed more time to process information. Pushing for closure before someone was psychologically ready usually backfired, while waiting too long after they were ready often meant losing the opportunity to a competitor. I developed sensitivity to buying signals, changes in language, questions about implementation, discussions about budget or timing that indicated someone was moving from evaluation to decision mode. When I recognized these signals, I would help move the process forward. When they weren't present, I would focus on providing value and building relationship rather than trying to close. The greatest wealth-building secret I learned wasn't about making new connections. It was about maintaining and deepening the relationships I already had. Most people focus all their energy on networking and meeting new people, but I discovered that the real fortune lies in the systematic nurturing of existing relationships over time. Early in my career, I made the common mistake of treating relationships like transactions. Once a business deal was completed or a favor was exchanged, I would move on to building new connections. But I began to notice that the most successful people I knew had incredibly strong long-term relationships with relatively small groups of people who consistently helped them achieve extraordinary results. This observation led me to completely restructure how I thought about relationship management. Instead of constantly seeking new contacts, I began investing more deeply in the relationships I already had. I developed what I called a relationship maintenance system that ensured I stayed connected with key people in my network regardless of immediate business needs. The foundation of this system was regular, value-driven contact that wasn't tied to asking for anything. I created a calendar that reminded me to reach out to important relationships at appropriate intervals, some monthly, some quarterly, some annually, with something useful or meaningful to share. These touches weren't generic checking-in messages. They were personalized communications that demonstrated I was paying attention to their world. I might send an article relevant to their industry, congratulate them on a recent achievement I had heard about, or simply share an insight that reminded me of a conversation we had months earlier. The psychology behind this approach is powerful. When you consistently add value to someone's life without asking for anything in return, you build what I call relationship equity. This equity accumulates over time and can be drawn upon when genuine opportunities for collaboration arise. More importantly, it positions you as someone who adds value to their network rather than someone who drains it. I learned to track not just contact information for my network, but personal details that helped me maintain meaningful connections. I would note birthdays, anniversaries, children's names and ages, career goals, and personal interests. This information allowed me to have authentic conversations that went beyond surface level business discussions. One of my most valuable relationship maintenance strategies was what I called celebration amplification. When someone in my network achieved something significant, a promotion, a business success, a personal milestone, I would not only congratulate them privately, but look for ways to amplify their achievement within my broader network. This might involve introducing them to other people who could benefit from their success, sharing news of their achievement with mutual contacts, or simply ensuring that their success was recognized in appropriate professional circles. This approach made people feel valued and celebrated, while also positioning me as someone who genuinely supported the success of others. I also developed systematic approaches for staying connected during different life and career phases. When people changed jobs, I would reach out to congratulate them and learn about their new role and company. When they faced challenges or setbacks, I would offer support and assistance. When they celebrated successes, I would join in their celebration. The long-term perspective was crucial to this approach. Some relationships in my network went through dormant periods where we had little direct contact, but I maintained awareness of their careers, an occasional light touch. When circumstances changed and opportunities for collaboration emerged, these dormant ties often became incredibly valuable. I learned that relationship maintenance requires different strategies for different types of connections. Close, professional relationships needed more frequent and deeper contact. Broader network connections required lighter but consistent touch. Industry acquaintances needed periodic but meaningful interaction around shared professional interests. The business returns on relationship maintenance were remarkable. Many of my most profitable opportunities came from relationships that had been developing for years before the right moment arrived. A former client who changed companies would bring me into their new organization. A colleague who had been promoted would recommend my services to their expanded network. An industry contact would think of me when they heard about an opportunity that matched my expertise. But perhaps the most important benefit was the compound effect of relationship maintenance on my reputation. As I became known as someone who maintained strong long-term relationships, people began to see me as a safe investment of their time and trust. They knew that connecting with me would be the beginning of a valuable long-term relationship rather than a single transaction. The key insight that transformed my approach was understanding that relationship maintenance isn't about what you might get from people, it's about who you become in the process. When you consistently invest in others' success and happiness over years and decades, you develop into the kind of person that others naturally want to help succeed. This transformation in your character and reputation becomes the foundation for sustainable wealth building that lasts throughout your entire career. As I reflect on how the principles I developed decades ago apply to today's world, I'm struck by how much technology has changed while human nature has remained constant. The tools for building relationships may have evolved, but the fundamental psychology of human connection remains exactly the same. When I first developed my approaches to winning friends and influencing people, all communication was face-to-face, by telephone, or through handwritten letters. Today's world of emails, social media, video calls, and instant messaging might seem to require completely different strategies. But I've observed that the most successful people today are those who use modern tools to apply timeless principles. The challenge with digital communication is that it can easily become impersonal and transactional. It's tempting to send generic messages to large groups of people or to rely on automated systems to maintain relationships. But I believe this approach misses the fundamental truth that meaningful relationships are built through personal attention and genuine care. The most successful modern networkers I've observed use technology to enhance personal connection rather than replace it. They might use LinkedIn to identify potential connections, but they personalize every outreach message. They might use email to stay in touch with their network, but they reference specific details from previous conversations and share content that's genuinely relevant to each person's interests. Social media platforms offer unprecedented opportunities to stay aware of what's happening in your network's professional and personal lives. You can celebrate their achievements, offer support during challenges, and share valuable resources all in real time. But the key is using these platforms to facilitate genuine human connection rather than simply broadcasting your own accomplishments. I've noticed that the most effective modern relationship builders treat social media as a research tool that helps them have better real-world conversations. They use the information they gather online to ask thoughtful questions during phone calls or meetings, demonstrating that they pay attention to what matters to people in their network. Video conferencing technology has created new opportunities for building relationships across geographic boundaries. You can now maintain face-to-face relationships with people around the world, participate in virtual networking events, and even host your own gatherings that bring together people from your network who might benefit from knowing each other. But the same principles apply. People want to feel heard, valued, and important. Whether you're in a physical room or on a video call, your success depends on your ability to make genuine connections with other human beings. The technology is just the vehicle for applying timeless relationship principles. One area where modern technology has dramatically expanded possibilities is in the ability to add value to your network. You can now instantly share relevant articles, introduce people through digital platforms, and provide valuable resources to anyone in your network regardless of where they're located. The key is being selective and thoughtful about what you share, ensuring that every interaction adds genuine value. I've also observed that the speed of modern communication creates both opportunities and dangers. You can respond to opportunities more quickly and maintain more frequent contact with your network, but you can also damage relationships by sending messages without proper thought or by overwhelming people with too much communication. The most successful modern relationship builders have learned to balance efficiency with personalization. They might use templates for certain types of communication, but they customize each message with personal details. They might use scheduling tools to ensure regular contact, but they vary the timing and content to feel natural rather than automated. Perhaps the most important modern application of relationship principles is understanding that Authenticity is more valuable than ever in a world where people are bombarded with generic marketing messages and superficial connections. When you take the time to build genuine relationships in an increasingly impersonal world, you stand out dramatically from the crowd. The fundamentals haven't changed. People want to feel important. They want to be heard. They want to connect with others who share their interests and values, and they want to work with people they trust. Technology has simply given us new ways to demonstrate these timeless human qualities. The most successful people I observe today are those who use modern tools to be more personal, not less personal. They leverage technology to remember important details about their network, to stay aware of opportunities to help others, and to maintain relationships across distances that would have been impossible in my era. But they never forget that behind every email address, social media profile, and video call is a human being with real hopes, fears, and aspirations. The wealthy relationship builders of today are those who use cutting-edge tools to apply ancient wisdom about human nature and genuine connection. As we reach the end of our journey together, I want to leave you with a practical action plan that will help you begin building wealth through relationships starting today. Everything I've shared with you works, but only if you consistently apply these principles in your daily interactions with others. The first step is to conduct an honest assessment of your current relationship capital. Take inventory of your existing network and evaluate the quality of these connections. How many people in your network would enthusiastically recommend you for opportunities? How many would you feel comfortable asking for advice or assistance? How many do you actively help and support in achieving their goals? This assessment isn't about judging yourself harshly. It's about understanding your starting point so you can make strategic improvements. Most people discover that while they know many people, they have relatively few deep, mutually beneficial relationships. This realization becomes the foundation for more intentional relationship building. Next, identify the types of relationships that would be most valuable for your career and business goals. This might include successful people in your industry, potential clients or customers, strategic partners, mentors who can guide your development, and peers who share your professional interests. The key is being specific about who you want to connect with and why those connections would be mutually beneficial. Once you've identified your relationship targets, begin positioning yourself where these people naturally gather. This might mean joining professional associations, attending industry conferences, participating in community organizations, or engaging in online communities where your ideal connections are active. Remember that successful networking requires putting yourself in the right places consistently over time. Develop your value proposition for new relationships. What unique knowledge, skills, connections, or resources can you offer to others? This isn't about being transactional, it's about understanding how you can genuinely contribute to other people's success. When you're clear about your value, you can approach new relationships with confidence and authenticity. Create a systematic approach to relationship maintenance. Decide how frequently you'll touch base with different categories of people in your network, and develop a calendar or system that ensures these contacts happen consistently. The specific system matters less than your commitment to using it regularly. Begin implementing the specific techniques I've shared with you in every interaction. Practice remembering and using people's names. Ask thoughtful questions about their work and interests. Look for opportunities to make others feel important and valued. Listen more than you talk. Offer help before asking for it. Most importantly, start thinking long-term about every relationship you build. Some of the most valuable connections in your network will take years to develop into significant business opportunities. Plant seeds today that you may not harvest for many seasons, trusting that consistent relationship investment always pays dividends over time. Set specific, measurable goals for your relationship building activities. This might include meeting a certain number of new people each month, having meaningful conversations with existing contacts on a regular schedule, or facilitating a specific number of introductions between people in your network. What gets measured gets managed. Track your progress and adjust your approach based on what you learn. Pay attention to which relationship-building activities generate the best results for you, and focus more energy on those approaches. Not every technique will work equally well for every person or in every situation. Remember that building wealth through relationships is a marathon, not a sprint. The people who achieve the greatest success are those who consistently apply these principles over years and decades, gradually building a network of strong relationships that create compound returns over time. As I close, I want you to understand that what I've shared with you isn't just a business strategy, it's a philosophy of life that can transform not only your financial success, but your personal fulfillment. When you genuinely invest in others' success and happiness, you create a life rich in meaningful relationships and abundant opportunities. The principles I've taught you have guided me through decades of business success and personal satisfaction. They've opened doors I never could have imagined and created friendships that have enriched my life immeasurably. But most importantly, they've allowed me to contribute to the success of countless others, which has been the most rewarding aspect of my entire career. The choice is now yours. You have the knowledge and the tools to begin building relationship wealth starting today. The question is whether you'll have the patience and persistence to apply these principles consistently over time. I'm confident that if you do, you'll discover what I learned long ago, that the greatest wealth comes not from what you achieve alone, but from what you accomplish in partnership with others who believe in your success as much as you believe in theirs. Go forward with confidence, knowing that every person you meet is a potential gateway to opportunities you can't yet imagine. Treat each relationship as a precious investment in your future, and watch as the compound returns transform both your bank account and your life.